Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for NAADSN's Ideas Series for September 2024. I'm Nicholas Gillespie. I'm the Network Administrator of the North American and Arctic Defense and Security Network and a PhD student at Trent University in Peterborough, Ontario. Today, we are pleased to welcome Canada's Defense Attaché to Mexico, Colonel Alain Veilleux. And our discussion today will be moderated by Dr. Hristoulas, who is a professor and researcher at ITAM in Mexico City. He is also the coordinator of the diploma course National Security at the same institute. He received his PhD degree from McGill University in 1996. And before relocating to Mexico, he was the military and strategic postdoctoral fellow at NIPSIA at Carleton University in Ottawa. Dr. Hristoulas has published extensively on security issues, mainly in North America. He has also published on civil-military relations, and recently his research has focused on the security sector reform in Mexico, specifically on how to make Mexico's security services and agencies more efficient, and at the same time on how to make these institutions respect basic principles of democracy. I would also like to thank NAADSN Research Fellow Manuel Carranza for assisting in organizing today's event. So with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Hristoulas. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicholas. Well, thank you everybody for showing up to this little workshop that we have here. It's nice to I guess expand a little bit the areas of interest for the center to include Mexico. More often than not, Mexico is not really considered or not taken into account when defense policies are designed, not only in the case of Canada, but also in the case of the United States. And in order to help us understand this a little bit better, we have with us today the attaché, the Canadian attaché in the Canadian Embassy here in Mexico. I'm in Mexico. I'm actually located physically in Mexico right now, so we're actually not too far apart, Colonel. But just a quick bio. It's enormous. I had to cut out sections of it to make it workable. Colonel Alain Veilleux was born in New Brunswick and Chatham. He enlisted in the Canadian Forces in 1991 and joined 2nd Battalion Royal, the Vendoux, actually, right? The 22nd Regiment.
Correct.
At the Citadel in Quebec City in 1992, after holding positions as platoon commander, 5 Canadian Mechanized Brigade Group, HQ liaison officer, and assistant adjutant, participated in United Nations deployment in Croatia. He was transferred to the Canadian Forces Recruiting Center in Vancouver, where he was responsible for attracting new recruits in British Columbia. From 2001-2003, he served in 3rd Battalion in the Vendoux and was deployed on a NATO mission as company second in command in Bosnia, and then unit adjutant upon his return. Deployed as G5 of JTF in Afghanistan, in Kandahar between 2007 and 2008. When I think Jamie Cade was there as well, right about that time, right? Where he received his first Chief of Defense commendation. As Lieutenant Colonel, he then worked as G1 plans for the Canadian Army before being deployed on a year-long operational tour with MONUSCO in Kinshasa, in the Democratic Republic of Congo, as Chief of Liaison, where he was awarded his second Chief of Defense commendation. Between 2017 and 2019, he worked on his second master's degree at the Inter-American Defense College in DC. And the Colonel is currently, as I mentioned in the beginning, is currently the defense attaché at the Canadian Embassy, but he's also accredited in Belize and Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, Nicaragua, and Panama since 2021. He's married to Brigitte, and he has 2 adult children, Amélie and Philippe. Thank you, Colonel, for being with us. And without further ado, please help us understand this complex relationship between Canada and Mexico.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction, and certainly happy to be here. Good day to everyone, and thank you for being here. So obviously, so it looks like okay. So obviously, there's a pretty big integration between Canada, US, and Mexico, or North America, for economics, but often the defense relations, as per se, are not something that we are necessarily tracking as much. And it is for a reason. I mean, when the ministers of defense meet, and they do meet once in a while, often enough, they meet and they talk about each of their individual priorities in Canada, US, and in Mexico. And the cooperation is somewhat something that's a little bit more complicated. So what I want to talk about really is a little bit about the context, the mechanisms that we have in place, some of the challenges and opportunities, and basically what's next here. So there is a very strong bilateral and trilateral cooperation between the three countries. It is an important relation because security and stability on the North American continent is important, and we do share a number of values. While Mexico is often seen as a Latino country, it's seen by a lot of the Latino countries as a North American countries. They share a lot of values of us. However, the priorities and challenges are very different among our three countries. So that does impact a little bit of the cooperation. And there is some strategic risks taken with cooperation. Some of it has to do with really the high level politics, and some of it just has to do with with the priorities that we share. So really, to understand, I think one of the first thing to look at is really the missions that the Canadian Armed Forces have, which have been outlined once again in our recent defense policy update, and kind of compare that to what the Army and the Navy have in Mexico. And we see very quickly that in 6 of the 8 Canadian Armed Forces missions, there is at least some sort of allusion to partnerships, coalitions, alliances, and that type of thing. Canada really views its defense through the eyes of alliances and partners. And we take a look at the Army and the Navy, and a lot of it has to do with interior security, assistance to the local population, and support for national development. So very, very internally focused. So whereas Canada is looking to build alliances, in terms of Mexico, they'll work in alliance, but mainly to the internal problems. Obviously, this has to do a lot with history, the history of the different U.S. invasions, for example, colonization, France and Spain. So in Mexico, they do have a tendency to protect their sovereignty quite a bit. Whereas for us, given the especially the more recent experiences through the Boer War, through the First World War, Second World War, Korea, where a lot of the Canadian military history really has to deal with alliances and things like that. Politics obviously matters. So no matter what the cooperation happens at the military level, there is a lot of noise at the political level, and we do get a lot of our direction through the North American Leadership Summit. We have different views from Canada and Mexico on the geostrategic issues, whereas in Canada, we have a tendency to be a little bit more involved, and Mexico really want to play a little bit more of the broker type of things. And a bunch of different issues, whether it's Canada's obligations towards NATO, towards NORAD, that shifts the priorities through that. The importance of the defense industry, and even much more so since the pandemic and issues that we've had with the supply chain. The military culture is a little bit different between Canada and Mexico, although we do share a lot of the same same values. But Mexico is really one of the most important defense relations that Canada has. And a lot of it has to deal with the fact that it is also an important defense partner for the US. So that whole trilateral relation is important. And security and defense on the continent is certainly an important thing. And because of that, we have an established Canada-Mexico Defense Cooperation Agreement, which we do not necessarily have with all of the countries, but because of that, that mandates several activities that we do need to do. We get a lot of our direction through the North American Defense Ministerial. So the four ministers, two ministers from Mexico, Canadian minister, and the American Secretary of Defense, meet basically yearly to discuss a bunch of different issues. And from the last one, there was an agreement on the continental threat assessment, of getting a secure information sharing system for sharing classified strategic intelligence, cooperating in humanitarian assistance and disaster response, trilateral cooperation in Central America, cooperation for cyber defense, cooperation in regional multilateral defense institutions, and capacity building and peace support operations. So several amount of activities that we're interested in. We're also mandated to do a Canada-Mexico defense dialogue. There we go really into a lot more detail in some of the bilateral issues, and a lot of it is sharing experiences where Mexico and Canada have smaller militaries than the Americans. So there's issues where Mexico has a little bit more of an attachment and willing to share with the US because of that. For example, the Canadian Armed Forces structure, how can they adapt their structure to resemble a little bit like us? But talking a lot about military education, cyber operations, recruiting, and those types of things. Gender integration and equality is certainly one of the big issues that we talk a lot about. Some of the regional issues that affect Mexico's stability and security, whether it's the cartels, trafficking, illegal fishing, and those types of things. And Canada always wants to share our viewpoint basically on some of the global issues because it's important that Mexico understands where we're coming from. There's quite a few bilateral day-to-day cooperation. So Canada offers a lot of participation to Mexican students, especially senior, whether it's language courses and participation in some of our national security programs and staff courses and stuff like that. Exchanges of instructors and students in different peace support training, including short serials here in Secopam in Mexico, various conferences and seminars. Canada was a country of honor for the Mexico's aerospace exhibition, staff visits, and all those types of things. So quite a bit of visits and things like that. And there's a lot of physical, tactical level trilateral cooperation with the Americans, and we're seeking to increase a little bit of that as well. However, there's some challenges here. There's some challenges because we view security and defense from different lenses. So whereas we're focused on modernization, and especially for NATO and NORAD, and investing a lot of money for equipment there, the Mexican armed forces are more focused on, right now especially, on supporting the national strategic critical infrastructure. So whether it's the Maya train, whether it's the transoceanic corridor, and things like that, all for national development. And there's a lot of their budgets that is going towards that. And at the political level, they're investing in replacing a lot of equipment rather than modernizing. And that has to do much more with the challenges that they have and the challenges that we have more than anything else. We're also focused a lot in the Canadian Armed Forces on reconstitution, which is our internal challenge to us, but it does have an effect on how we cooperate with other nations. Our relation with the Canadian defense industry is very different. In Canada, it's really the relations with the civilian defense industry. In the Mexican armed forces, they're building their internal defense industry. Whereas Canadian Armed Forces and the Mexican Armed Forces are a little bit smaller in relative terms, Mexico has a lot more personnel, but a little bit of a smaller budget than Canada does have. So that as well has an influence on how we cooperate. We have very different views on the threat environment. We view strategic competition, Russia, China, Iran, and those types of threats as very important. In Mexico, it's really the internal issues that are more important, and they tend to have a more neutral view towards our strategic threats that we have. As well, Canada, US, Mexico, and Mexico, Canada have very different approaches to their bilateral relations. So we're really involved in very different areas, if you want. However, we have to recognize that the US and Mexico share a very strong defense bond with over 1,500 defense activities conducted in Mexico annually. Obviously, Mexico, Canada, we're nowhere near that, but we do have quite a few training and education cooperation and information sharing activities. As well, there is a challenge in a lot of the stuff that the Mexican armed forces are involved in. For us in Canada, it is really the civilian ministries, whether it's public security, public safety, or other that provincial issues that take charge. So often enough, the Mexicans will ask us for help from the Coast Guard, from the police, or other things. And these are things that in the military we have to kind of transmit their requests to other government agencies. And as well, we're part of the Five Eye community. Mexico is not. So there's a little bit of challenges in sharing intelligence and sharing technologies that we have to acknowledge, and we tend to try to work around that as much as possible. And as well, obviously, in Canada, the military does not do internal intelligence, so we don't necessarily spy on Canadians, and there's very strict regulations on that. In Mexico, it's kind of the other way around. So again, sharing sensitive information becomes a little bit of a challenge on that. However, there are some opportunities. The military education system here in Mexico is really open to some of the global challenges. So we're looking at getting a little bit more involved in that, sharing a little bit more in terms of opportunities with the defense industrial complex, and especially with the new administration coming in, seeing where we can perhaps cooperate. The shared values is certainly something that we are looking to deepen, and especially for Indigenous peoples, which is a value that we both share. For us in the military, it's something we've been talking about for a while. And in Mexico, it's something that is starting. Cyber threats and cybersecurity in our environment, it's certainly a threat that we both share. Intelligence, we're seeing from the new administration some potential investments that they want to make in there. So we'll see where we can go. And potentially, there's a lot of collective training exercises between US and Mexico. And we're looking at doing some trilateral stuff as well. Changes in the Mexican administration. So they're starting a new 6-year mandate, a new security strategy that is upcoming, new secretaries of the Defense and Secretary of the Navy. So there is potential there to see, to build on the existing relation that we have. There are going to be some issues. Some of the issues is the constitutional reforms that have just been approved in the past few weeks and days that will impact the relation, but will also give us the opportunity to see where we can work and contribute. An example of that is the military justice system that is basically being reformed in Canada, and potentially something that we can work with Mexico on that. Mexico's foreign policy was a challenge for us during the last sexennial. We're looking forward to working with the new administration of that. We have a new defense policy as well. A lot of the themes regarding cooperation in the region are repeated. So we know that there's at least a status quo in our objectives with Mexico and the rest of the region. But it also gives us a little bit of leeway to engage with stuff like defense industry, the changing character of conflict and things like that. And I guess the other thing that we're looking at at cooperating on is really Russia and Mexico. During the last sexennial, it wasn't necessarily something that we would necessarily talk a lot about with the activities that Russia is doing right here now in Mexico. It's something that we're really anxious to pursue the conversation with them. So really, Mexico is a priority. There is an asymmetric relationship between the three countries, but it's something that it is a priority amongst our three countries to make it work. There are challenges, but we are working around that. Really, I'm looking forward to deepen any of the things that I've touched upon because I've really did a 20,000 foot scan of some of the items and challenges that we have, but certainly ready to talk about anything that you want to ask about.